Hello, everybody. Thanks for your support with the Straight Outta BS podcast. It's really showing a difference in the algorithms, so just keep on interacting with the video. It really helps push these videos out to new audiences so more people learn about these places and we can hopefully save and prevent some children from being sent away. I want to thank my Patreon members, anybody that's donated financially. From the bottom of my heart, it really means a lot. It's never expected. That's not why I do this, but if you feel inspired to donate, it's just awesome. So thank you guys for that. I want to do a moment of silence for the person still struggling with intrusive thoughts or addiction or anything like that. So on the count of three, I'm going to do a moment of silence. One, two, three. Okay, thank you for that. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce my guest for the day. Go ahead and introduce yourself and where you went and what years.
Well, my name is Tammy Chorus. I was in Straight Incorporated from 1982 to 1984. I started in the Sarasota program. It was shut down for child abuse while I was there.
Okay.
It was on the news, in the newspaper, 2020, 60 Minutes. You would think that my parents would have enough common sense to get me out of there, but they did not. I did escape. The third time was the final time, where I actually called them and threatened to press charges for kidnapping had they tried to kidnap me again. But I escaped three times. I was brought back twice. Escaping from straight was extremely difficult. I'll get into that a little bit later. If you did escape and you were brought back, you were literally tortured.
Yeah.
And all kinds of crazy stuff went on there. They had enema therapy, which is exactly what it sounds like. They had spanking machines, they had spit therapy, starvation, they had something called marathoning, where you were kept awake for days
Yeah.
on end.
Yeah.
So everything that is considered torture by the Geneva Convention was somehow overlooked and allowed at Straight Incorporated to American teenagers. And this also connects to the White House, believe it or not. Nancy
Yeah.
Reagan actually promoted this program. And the Bush administration, I know you know there's ties to the CIA.
Yeah.
My theory, we can't figure out why they allowed this to go on. My theory is they wanted to see what would work and what wouldn't work in
It
places like
bingo.
Guantanamo Bay. And
Bingo. Yeah.
that's exactly what I think. The American government has a long history of experimenting on its
Yep.
own people.
MK Ultra,
Um,
all that. Yep.
and I think it was an extension of MK
Yep.
Ultra.
I would agree.
And you can't really just talk about this with people
No.
without sounding like an absolute total lunatic.
No, but
So
the crazy thing is that all the information is literally there. Like this is public knowledge. Like you can look this information up and find the evidence for yourself. Like there are people that were involved with MK Ultra that came out and talked and spoke against it, you know? Like there's tons of evidence to this stuff, but people just I also feel like there's a people don't want to believe that this stuff would happen. You know what I mean? So there's like an air of like they're kind of like biased in that sense where it doesn't matter how much evidence you show them. If they don't want that to be true bad enough, then they will create any reason in their mind to call you crazy, whatever it is, to try and lighten what you're saying. But it's like, I experience the same. It's very hard to convince certain people. Because I've even talked about some of this stuff, and some people are like, "Oh, you're just crazy," for that. It's like, no, but if you start connecting the dots and follow the money, like, where's this money going? Like, why? We know that MK Ultra also. What happened is MK Ultra they got rid of that, right? But it rebranded into something called Monarch Mind Control, which is not a lot of people even know about. It's heavy in the entertainment industry. It's heavy in politics. It's used pretty much everywhere, and it's more so MK Ultra rebranded, but also they keep it like secret to a degree. Like not too many people know about it. They don't know that MK Ultra never actually ended. It just rebranded, which is the same kind of tactic that these schools use when there's any sort of controversy. they will, shut their doors, and then they would just open up it under rebranded new name and be like, that was an old school, not affiliated with us, and continue to abuse children. So sorry to go off on a tangent there, but
No,
continue what
you're
you were
right.
saying.
And there is a flow chart of straight. And it started with Synanon, but that was for adults that
Yeah,
chose that. And then they started what is called the Seed, that was here in Hollywood, Florida, which ironically, after 25 years now, I'm back in Hollywood.
wow.
Um,
Okay.
and so they shut the Seed down for, guess what? Child abuse.
Yeah,
So what
yeah,
did they do? They moved it to another town in Florida. They renamed it. Same shit, different day. I
yeah,
mean, and the list of illegal things, I could go on and on. Like, we weren't allowed to go to school. I mean, we're talking, there was kids in there as young as 12 kept out of school for years. Um, there was no medical care except for the doctor that inspected us to see whether or not we
yeah.
were virgins.
Whether
Um,
whether or not he was certified is another story, you know?
who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
But we had medication where we don't know what the hell they were giving us.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Um, um, I kind of I want to start from, I guess, the beginning,
Yeah,
because I'll go on all these crazy tangents and really sound crazy. And the place was so crazy that trying to explain the
yeah,
craziness of it
yeah,
makes you sound crazy.
yeah,
Um, so let me take a few steps back. So I was a very rebellious teenager. So I was very rebellious. I didn't get along with my mom at all. Um, I just couldn't seem to do anything right. So as I got older, I became rebellious, and eventually I was running away. Um, Now, straight branded itself as drug rehab. You can take a heroin addict and put them in a program for 28 days. That is rehab.
yeah,
Okay, we were not drug addicts, most of us. I
yeah,
mean, I had experimented with stuff. I was a teenager. That's what kids
yeah.
do. They drink, they smoke pot, they try different things.
Mhm.
All part of teenage experimentation. I was by no means ever a drug addict, so justifying keeping me locked up for 2 years for drug rehabilitation is ridiculous. There was nothing rehabilitative about that program. And actually, we have over 500 suicides from Straight Incorporated. Um, so, anyways, I was a very rebellious kid. Um, and so my parents kept locking me up in all these places. And of course, I'd run away. So I guess they found a place that was supposedly escape proof. Um, and yet I ran away. So uh, straight was a little bit different. So during the day, well, let me go back to the intake. Okay, so um, you're not seen by any kind of a counselor in straight. There was nobody with any credentials at all, except for Dr. Miller Newton. And it turns out his doctorate was a mail order doctorate for anthropology.
Hmm.
So all these parents are thinking there's all these certified staff members and a doctor's running it, and it was bullshit. Um, so I was from Hollywood, Florida, the East Coast, and Sarasota is on the other side of the state, northwest. So the intake consists of other captives of the program that are further along, and they call it phases. So originally, my intake was done by two other girls around my age. Um, and then later, they kept bringing more people into the intake room. And these intake rooms are really small. They're like
Like a
maybe
trailer or
8 by.
something?
No, it was like a room. Now, mind you, this was a warehouse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a warehouse, but they had like an office and the front office, which you would never see except for on your intake
Yeah.
or later in your phases if you were like used as slave labor to work or clean the office or whatever. So really the only time I ever saw that office is when I was brought there for my intake. And then they had these little tiny rooms that were maybe 5 by 8, you know, rooms. So I go in the intake room and I sit in the chair, and I thought it was weird that these girls were sitting in front of the door. So they had me literally cornered immediately, which was concerning, I guess. But you know, I actually willingly went there, whereas in most kids were tricked because I wanted some kind of help um, because the family dysfunction was bad.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, so I was honest with, stuff that I had done. And um, then I was like, I was struck by how weird, how they looked the same, how they spoke very weird. All right. So I guess straight is now classified as a cult. It was kind of a cult prison concentration camp type place. It's now classified as a cult. So the kids wore polo shirts. Girls wore their hair pinned back. There was no
Yeah.
makeup or jewelry of any kind allowed. Um, and they spoke weird. Like they spoke English, but the phrases they were using didn't make sense. Like it's not stuff that like you would hear anybody use out in the real world, which is one of the dynamics of a cult is that they do develop their own language. So I thought this was weird. I'm like, well, when do I see a counselor? You know, well, we work on peers. So basically, you have like a Lord of the Flies situation. And let me tell you something, no kid went in an intake. Nobody was ever turned away for not needing help. So
Yeah.
the uh, the scare tactic was, and I guess they still use it. They tell the parents, "Oh, it's so much worse than you thought. And if you don't leave your child with us, they're going to die." Like they
Yeah.
convince the parents that you're gonna die. And I mean, I was a pretty wild kid. I admit it, and I did um, a lot of wild stuff, And but the what brought me to I had overdosed on some hallucinogenics, and it was really scary. And I ended up in the hospital, and I had decided in the hospital I'm going to turn over a new leaf. I'm not going to do like stupid stuff anymore. Um, I wasn't given that chance, so I willingly went there because I wanted some kind of help. And the help never came. Like
Yeah.
there was nothing helpful about it. So I was like, well, I don't think this is going to work. So they're bringing more and more girls in because I'm like, you can't keep me. I ain't staying here. To where eventually it was, I think, like 8 girls in that room, all screaming at me. Um, and then what else? Oh, yeah, they do a strip search on every child, but it's not just a strip search. They also do a
Yeah.
body cavity search. They don't
Yeah.
even do this shit in prison. Okay. So there was no reason for them to do a body cavity search. And they did this to every child, and this isn't a doctor or a nurse performing this body cavity search. This is a graduate of the program that's now on staff. That's
Yeah.
all the training that they had was uh, straight, whatever straight had taught them. So this wasn't anybody certified in any kind of a way. It was a teenage staff member, I think 16 or 17 years old, performing a body cavity search. And my theory on that is it wasn't to see if anybody was, hiding anything. I think it was done to shock and
Yeah.
terrify because it is an absolute sexual assault. So, in straight, every child was sexually assaulted during their intake. There's no reason to do that. And then to make sure that you don't run away when you're on first phase, and I was on first phase for a long time, they do what this thing is called belt looping, right? So they kind of stick their finger, their middle finger in the back of your belt loop, and then they twist it, and then they grab the back of your pants and they pull upwards, and you ain't going nowhere. I was little. I was not even 90 pounds. So here I've got these Amazon chicks, like, with my pants hiked up my ass, and they walked me into the group, and somebody was talking, and I noticed how like robotic they looked because there were so many rules in straight. And one of them was the way that you sat. You had to sit with your feet flat on the floor. You couldn't like lean back in your chair. And one of those rules was that you had to look at this person speaking. So they had the boys on one side, the girls on the other side. Um, and so everybody's looking at the person speaking, or their heads are pointed towards the person speaking as they're bringing me up this aisle. And there's probably about 100, 150 kids in that room. But the eyes, so they're facing one direction at this person, but the eyes are following without turning their heads, which was just really creepy.
Yeah.
And then they bring you in front of this group, and they're like, does anybody know her? And because I was from Hollywood, I didn't really know anybody. I knew one kid, and it was from some other place that my parents had me, so I didn't really know him. So automatically, if it's anybody that you've ever met prior to straight, no matter if you did drugs with them or not, they were called your druggy friends. So I was never allowed to, well, males and females were allowed to speak to each other or even look at each other for that matter, until you're like way further along in the program, like ready to graduate. Um, you're also not allowed to speak to other newcomers, nor are you allowed to even look at them. They called it clicking. Like, um, it was just really creepy. And every time somebody, like, they could be screaming at you, poking you in your chest, spitting in your face, and
Hmm.
then as soon as like that confrontation is over, it's followed with "I love you." So they're training your brain to associate abuse and love, which affects you and your relationships forever, for
Yeah.
fucking ever. So anyway, uh so I went to turn like to somebody like to say something, and you're not allowed to speak,
Yeah.
unless you're called upon.
Yeah.
So everybody's like, "Shh." And they have all these like weird hand signals. Anyway, so I was brought to this foster home, and it was two sisters, and there's no furniture in the rooms at night. You're not allowed clothes to sleep in either. So girls sleep in t-shirts and underwears, and boys, I guess, only slept in their underwears. Mattresses and pillows were for old comers. So they had like deadbolts on the doors. They had alarms on the doors. They would put the mattress up against the door, and the key would be pinned, safety pinned into the old comer's underwear. Of course, I was getting the hell out of there, so I tried to escape the first night. I didn't know that the windows were screwed shut. So everything is controlled. You're held by your pants. It's not like I've had people say, "Well, why didn't you just run away?" Well, don't you think
Yeah.
I tried? Like, any movement, any free movement that you have, even in a locked house, you got your pants up your ass. All the doors are dead bolted. All the windows are screwed shut. Some of the homes I was in, there was actually boarded up windows. Um, and then it's the same thing every day. So um, you go into the building. If your old comer uh, works or goes to school, you might be dropped off at that building at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then you're stuck in this intake room. Um, and you don't leave there until 9, 10 o'clock at night. Um, they only take you to the bathroom twice a day, feeding you, like, I don't know what it wasn't. edible, most of the food. So it was just at the whim of the child staff member, like how long you got to eat. So one day they might like you might get 2 bites out of your food and then have to throw it away. Another day, like you might be forced to eat something that you can't even identify. Like it was just the whim of the child staff member. And I say child because these kids were all under the age of 18. No, there was really no adult supervision. So, um, and they made you like to get called on, you had to flap your arms like a chicken. I'm sure you've seen videos of that. Um, I can't even do it.
Hmm.
I can't even do it. But I mean, my shoulders I have issues with, my neck I have issues with. Um, so basically it was attack therapy. If you didn't conform, and people say, I would never conform. Well, you know what? You weren't kept awake for 4 days in a row. You weren't
Yeah.
starved. You weren't subject to enema therapy. You weren't sat on. And so I've heard Miller Newton like in an interview saying, "Oh, it's wildly exaggerated." No, it wasn't. It was not wildly exaggerated. So what they did was they would have a child sit on each of your limbs. So just imagine a child on each one of your limbs and then somebody on your chest. This was their punishment. And it didn't take much to get sat on. So let's say um, I'm in group and I lean back in my chair, right? Because that's not allowed. That gave other people around you permission. And what they would do is they would rake their knuckle down your spine to make you sit up straight. So if you swatted at somebody like, don't touch me, that was all it took, like for everybody around you to jump on you and sit on you. And they sat on you until a staff member said it was time to get off of you. And this could go on for hours. Like it was literal physical torture. Um, I was non-compliant, so they kept like making up all these weird punishments for me. And they put me on I'm sure you've heard of the infamous peanut butter diet, where you're fed nothing but peanut butter sandwiches. And it's not Skippy or Jif. This is like some generic shit, on like really bad Wonder Bread, and it wasn't even like really a sandwich. It was a ball of peanut butter and a ball of some off-brand bread, and they also limited my water intake. So, those little bathroom Dixie cups that are like this big?
Yeah.
That was all I was given twice a day. So, not even enough water to sustain a dog. So showers is, where I got most of my water. My shower was spent gulping water because I was so thirsty. Um, and hygiene, forget it. There was no shaving, there was no deodorant, not on first phase anyway. You had like 30 seconds to brush your teeth. Um, and then, you're put in this intake room with a bunch of other newcomers with no deodorant, not shaven, maybe got 30 seconds to brush their teeth, and it was just really bad. There was no reading except for the shit they had on the walls, which was an aberrated version of the 12-step program. Um, and like you would have breakfast in your foster home if you were lucky. Um, and then your lunch and dinner was fed to you at straight. So say, you're in your foster home and you're eating cereal, don't look at that cereal box. You'd be accused of reading. So reading wasn't allowed. So there was no talking to your parents. You had to earn that. And that came weekly, where you would get 5 minutes to speak to your parents after their open meetings. And I'll tell you about open meetings in a minute. But if you said anything negative about the program, the conversation would be terminated. Your speaking to your parents was to tell them that you love them and to confess to something that you did. So that reinforces the parents' belief that, oh, well, look, my kid loves me, they're doing well, and they're telling me all of these awful things that I never knew about, so that reinforces that the parents doing the right thing. And open meetings were where all the kids had to be there. So there would probably be about 200 kids because St. Sarasota and St. Pete were pretty big programs. Um, and all of the seven steppers, they call them seven steppers, graduates of the program, they would come. Their parents and siblings would come. So again, the girls are split, right? And now the parents are on the other side of the room. So, you're talking maybe 500 people in a room, right? Now you want to talk about public humiliation, right? So, so if you didn't earn the right to talk, you know, for 5 minutes with your parents would, they would pass the microphone. So if it was kids that were at home or kids that were on an upper phase, their parents would just say, "Oh, I love you, Jamie. I love you, Matthew," or whatever. And then God help the kid that's on first phase that hasn't earned the right to speak to their parents. Then their parents stand up with that microphone, right? And again, this is like all the parents, all the kids, all the graduates, all the siblings, right? And then they're standing there with a microphone saying how what a disappointment you are. You need to get it together, and now I know this is the right place for you. And in the meantime, they have no idea that there's no hygiene. They have no idea you're being starved. They have no idea that you're getting the shit kicked out of you every day. They have no idea what spit therapy is because you can't tell them. Um, and this went on for me for like 20 months. So during the time that Sarasota was being investigated for child abuse, I was kept in a corner, and that investigation went on for probably like 6 weeks or something.
I'm going to open up the presents now if you want to be part of it.
I'll be right there.
Another 5 minutes, 10
Oh,
minutes.
okay. I'm sorry, I'm at a relative's house.
Sorry.
So so what was I saying about Sarasota? Was it Sarasota was being shut down, right? So they had like these investigators. And so, of course, they aren't going to beat the shit out of these kids during the investigation. And they're not going to have like these really weird or confrontational, what they called rap sessions. That wasn't going on during the time that they were being investigated and investigators were there. So instead of like, torturing me, I got a sabbatical and I was sitting in the corner. I was sitting in a corner for like 6 weeks, just sitting in a corner all day, facing a corner. Um, and again, like for lunch, they would drop a that peanut butter sandwich in my little Dixie cup of water. And again, like if you had to go to the bathroom, and it didn't matter what phase you were on, if it wasn't that bathroom time, too bad. So you were never, one of the rules was if you were on first phase, you always had to have eye contact with your newcomer. So if you were going to the bathroom, there was no door. They had to maintain eye contact. They also had this weird thing with toilet paper. We were only allowed 3 sheets of toilet paper. So um, obviously you could only pee like in the building. Same thing in the foster home. Like if you were going to the bathroom, you had to maintain eye contact with somebody. I don't think I know this sounds gross. I don't think I shit for like 20 days. Like I should have been in a hospital. Like, I just couldn't go. But finally, you know, after 20 days, I should have been in a hospital for that. That's like, dangerous. Again, no medical treatment. Um, we would have in Sarasota, I don't remember any doctors in St. Pete, but in Sarasota, there was this doctor that would come like once a month. And so, like I said, they had this long line of girls, right, waiting to see this doctor. This was my first visit with the doctor. Um, and they put them on an OBGYN table, and there was a staff member, I think she was 17, sitting next to him with a chart writing yay or nay. And he was doing gynecological pelvic exams, letting the staff member know whether this girl was a virgin or not. And this was for all to see. All the girls in line going into that door, that's what they're seeing. They're doing this too. There was one girl 12 years old. Like, unbelievable. So, um, they gave me pills. They said they were antibiotics. I don't even know why I needed antibiotics. Um, and then, Sarasota was shut down and we went to St. Pete. So if you didn't look at the person talking, somebody would take your head and point it in that direction. If you weren't flapping your arms, and that's a mild example of it, people would grab your arms and do it. So I was just, after Sarasota was shut down, I was like, well, they can't make me do anything. They put two girls that were, I'm telling you, over 200 pounds. Here I am, like 90 pounds. And they literally shook my arms. I thought they were going to rip them out of the sockets. Um, so eventually I made second phase and I escaped from a foster home early one morning. Um, when I did go, I ended up going to a truck stop and getting a job with a Mayflower truck, right? And like helping load and unload the truck. And I made it all the way out to Texas. And they picked up this other worker, and she convinced me to call home. And I should have never done that. And I did. And so my parents talked me into going home. Um, I got on a plane in Houston and flew back home. And I was home for a few days. And I'm telling them the shit that's going on there. And they don't believe me. Like, well, it turns out, like, I guess the parents were trained, like, hey, look, your kid's going to tell you some wild things that are going on. Don't believe them. Like, they're trained not to believe them. Right. And so, like, how they talk me into going back, I don't even know. Right. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be tortured if I go back. And they're like, oh, they promised they're not going to torture you. Well, they did. And so now, like the first time I see my parents in an open meeting, I'm not even allowed to have a chair. I'm sitting on the floor, right? Because I'm not allowed to have a chair. And so, of course, you have to stand up when your parents have the microphone. So now I stand up. I've got two black eyes and a fat lip, and they didn't fucking notice that. And Sarasota was just shut down for child abuse. So again, they kept me there. And then we moved on to St. Pete, and I escaped from St. Pete. And now the second time I escaped, um, I was looking for somebody else that had escaped. I never found him, but I met these people, and they were like young, like in their 20s, and I think I was like 15 at the time. They took me in, and I'm trying to explain to them, like, I can't go outside in case people are going to be looking for me, and they will like literally kidnap me, throw me in a van, and take me back. And they didn't believe me, but it was true. So my dad, I guess some straight parent saw me at some store, and I'm like, I can't go back to that store. And they're like, come on, it'll be okay. And of course, I went back to that store, and my dad was like camped out there for God knows how long. And he like ran me down, chased me, threw me in the car. And he had like a two-seater, it was a Porsche. So he like hauled ass, like all the way back to the building. And then they came out of the building and they, tied me up and dragged me back in. Right? Again, like they're coming, and I'm telling them they're gonna mess me up. And Carrie's like, whatever it takes to get you straightened out. And I mean, was I that much of a drug addict that I needed 2 years of this shit, So the third escape, I was finally allowed to go back to school. Now, mind you, I had missed 2 full years of school, like so regular high school wasn't even an option for me anymore. So I was going to this vocational school, and I was taking GED classes and welding classes, and I wouldn't talk to anybody. I was afraid to talk to anybody. I think at that point I was like well on my way to being brainwashed. And one of the guys in my welding class like coaxed me into his car, right? I guess he had a friend that was in straight. He knew right away that I was in straight just by the way I looked, by the way I was afraid to interact with anybody. Um, and he took me to his house, like somewhere near St. Pete Beach, um, which like here I'm thinking the whole thing's a setup. I'm gonna get, these people are gonna bust in and tie me up and drag me back. And he's like, "Look, you're never." I actually hid at this guy's house. I think I hid in the closet, and it coaxed me out. I was like a fucking scared animal. And he's like, "Look, you're never going back there again." He goes, "You're gonna call that building." And see, I didn't know at the time that they had been sued because I knew that they would kidnap, like literally kidnap people that were over 18, that were not court ordered, and they would literally kidnap them and drag them back. So I was terrified. I had no idea about the Fred Collins case where he sued Straight for um, keeping him against his will. We weren't allowed to read newspapers or watch TV. We didn't know anything that was going on in the outside world. We weren't allowed to use telephones, so there was no calling for help. We were allowed near a phone even in the foster homes because somebody had their hands, your pants, up your ass. So
Wait,
there was no calling for help.
the foster home thing. I want to touch on that for a second. So what do you mean by the foster home thing? Where they would send you to foster homes?
Correct. So, in other words, it wasn't a facility because I guess Straight, what I found out later was Straight was licensed as a daycare. So we couldn't sleep there. So what they did was the parents of kids in Straight that were local would take out of town kids and kids on first base because if you're on first base, you're not allowed to talk to your parents. So, and I was an out of town kid. So I went to these foster homes. So they were parents of kids in the program.
Okay. Was there
And
a lot of abuse that happened to kids in the foster homes when they would
well,
get
yeah.
sent to these hos-
Well, yeah, because you've got 15-year-old kids in charge of your whole life, whether or not you get to go to the bathroom, when you go to the bathroom, if you get to go to the bathroom, what you get to eat. Don't forget, even in these foster homes, you still had your pants yanked up your ass. So there was no freedom of movement. There was um, I mean, you couldn't even go to the bathroom. You were locked in a locked room with no furniture and nothing in a t-shirt and underwear. So these were other parents of children in the program. Um, and these parents had to ask staff member for permission for everything. If their kid had a fever, they had to call a, a child staff member just to be able to give their kid an aspirin. Or God forbid somebody needed to go to the hospital. They had to have it cleared by a child. So, I mean, what parent in their right mind takes orders from another kid that has no credentials for any of this shit? So yeah, that we were in foster homes, and some foster homes were better than others. Some were more abusive than others. But don't forget, now when you're being marathoned, right? That means that your old comers are the ones doing this to you. So when I was kept awake for 3 and 4 nights in a row and being smacked, if like, my even standing up, if my eyes closed and I would get smacked. So the parents knew what marathoning was. They knew that there was no food or water, there was sleep deprivation. They knew that their child was doing this to somebody else's child in their home, which makes them all criminals.
Yeah.
So that's how the foster homes went. Some foster homes, the parents were really nice and loving, and the kids weren't like a total jackass. And then there was other foster homes that was an absolute nightmare. And they would bounce me from foster home to foster home all the time.
Which
Like,
could be
because
also looked at as trafficking. Just a
it is
legal version of trafficking or whatever the fuck they want to call it.
it absolutely is trafficking. I agree with you with that, especially when they shut the Sarasota program down. That was in uh Sarasota County, right? And they sent us to St. Pete, which was in Pinellas
Yeah,
County. So they
that could even be
they,
trafficking. Yeah.
they absolutely trafficked me against my will from one county in Florida to another county in Florida. I was not a willing participant. You are absolutely right. It was kidnapping and trafficking 100%.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
So, uh, but yeah, so this guy had me call the building, and again, I didn't know about the Fred Collins case because we weren't allowed to watch TV, listen to radios, read newspapers, none of that shit. So I had no idea that Straight had been sued, and I didn't know about all of the lawsuits. They were pretty much sued into oblivion, thank God. But the rest of us will never get any compensation from it. And he's like, you're going to tell them that if they kidnap you, you will, and people don't hear from you, they're going to know that you've been kidnapped, and they're going to send the cops to Straight looking for you. And once I said that, that was it. They called my parents. They're like, she's not welcome back. Like just like that. Like, you know, I didn't want to talk about what happened to me there because well, I didn't think anybody would believe me. Um, I never sought any kind of counseling. I just had to deal with it. And it wasn't until later that I was diagnosed with PTSD and then later with complex PTSD. So, um, my sister was not in the program, but she was afraid of being sent there and she committed suicide. So I don't know what they did to those.
Because she was afraid of being sent there? Or was there other
Right.
like
So siblings have to go through these wraps also, right?
yeah,
And so on the weekends, my parents would bring my little sister and they would do these um, rap groups like we had. And I don't know how intense they are because I was never in one. So I don't know. And I know that towards the end, my parents were like making a lot of excuses as to why they weren't bringing my sister. Like, well, she has school functions to deal with and stuff like that. Because this is like a 5 hour drive from, from Hollywood to St. Pete. So they're like, making all these reasons for her not to go. So towards the end, she wasn't coming around to Straight a whole lot. Um, but I had been out of Straight for a while. And she had done something she was probably going to get arrested for. Nothing big, not a big deal. But she had uh, attended a party and she told people she was going to kill herself. They didn't believe her because she was, a good student, never really got in trouble, smart, well put together girl. And that's basically what she said is it's like, when my parents find out what I did, they're going to put me in Straight and I'd rather be dead because I didn't come back the same person that I went in. Um, I guess torture does that to you.
yeah.
So, um, but yeah, Straight was, you could ask me questions about Straight. I could go on and on for days of the crazy shit that went on there and still not even touch the tip of the iceberg. Miller Newton is dead. Yay. He died, what, a couple of months ago? It's the best news I've had in my whole life. You can't hurt anybody
Wait,
else
who
ever.
is that for the people that might not know?
Miller Newton was one of the directors of Straight Incorporated. And he actually started Kids of Bergen County in New Jersey. For some reason, New Jersey caught on to him pretty quick and shut him down. And
Good.
he was ordered never to work with children again. So what does he do? He turns himself into a priest and changes his name and opens a compound. Guess where? Pinellas County. I don't know. I had called the sheriff's office and I'm like, I'm sure that he's keeping people in there against their will. And they're like, well, we don't have any complaints. And I'm like, you don't understand. If they're being held against their will, they have no way to complain. Nothing ever came of it. I don't know. I don't know, but I know nobody's at that compound now. He's dead and gone and hallelujah.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing,
So
at least.
yeah, so all of the major players that were involved in Straight, most of them are dead. Like Mel
Yeah.
and Betty Sembler, Miller Newton, Nancy Reagan, they're all dead. So even if I did want to sue, there is nobody to sue. The straight was sued into oblivion. So for the lucky few that did have lawsuits, I'm happy for them. I don't begrudge them for that. And that's what got it shut down. But the rest of us will never get compensation for it because it no longer exists. But their federal tax ID does exist. And you know that drug-free America, you know the DARE program that goes to
Yeah.
schools?
Yeah.
That that federal tax ID for the DARE program is Straight Incorporated's federal tax ID number.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. Yeah, they've infiltrated. Yeah. Dare's still going to schools. They're still doing stuff. Because I saw an interview with like the head of Dare or whatever, and he's still to this day like still doing stuff like that. So it's
I mean,
very
they're saying they're preventing it, but really, I think it's like a spy program because I had friends that had like nightmare experiences after DARE showed up at their school. Like, I have one friend who said that, you know, their mom smoked pot, and then the next thing you know, DCF is there and they're looking under their beds and they're like searching their house for
no,
drugs.
that could yeah,
And
that could easily be because like then you can take the child away from the family, put them into foster care, and then that's another head in foster care, which means you could potentially benefit from that financially. So I could see something like
Of
that
course.
happening.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
it's big
It's an
business,
information
especially in
gathering.
Florida.
Yeah. I mean, like the whole thing, like if you make like the foster care system like is based on how many kids you have like placed or whatever. So like that's pretty much what you're gonna get paid from what I hear. So you
Correct.
literally incentivizes them to get as many children out of these homes as possible. I'm sure there's a lot
Correct.
of good social, foster care workers and stuff like that, but I know that there's also a lot of bad ones that are probably doing some shady shit that, is involving, taking children that might not be need to be taken, like planting evidence on a perfectly normal family or whatever. Or maybe they're not perfect or whatever, but there's no reason to take the child out of the home, but they do it
They,
anyways.
yeah, so they get federal funding and that goes to the state, and then the county gets state funding, and it is a business. And so these foster kids, let me give you an example. And this is how Florida works. So a child might go to foster care, whether or not they're from an abusive home, who knows, right? But the reports that these DCF workers make, they could say anything they want,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Right. So they can make up all kinds of outrageous allegations and put that on, and there's no recourse to sue them for slander or defamation or any. There's no recourse because they're protected, right? And so these kids now go into the foster care system. So if they don't have enough foster homes and the group homes are full, that child will be sent to a juvenile detention facility.
yeah.
Okay. So
Which
so
I would do
now
that too. Yeah,
you've taken a child, you've traumatized them by removing them, whether they did or did not need to be removed from their home. And you put them in fucking jail, right? And then, right, so now because the kid is like not a criminal, right? The other kids might pick on them. They might get into fights, right? And so now this poor foster child that was put in a situation gets charges on them for fighting or for stealing or
yeah,
whatever. Like that wouldn't have happened if they weren't thrown in jail because there was no charge, right? And now the kid might have charges and turn 18. Guess where they go? They don't go home.
yeah,
They don't go out on the streets. They go to prison
yeah. Yep.
for
No.
something they never should have been as in that situation. So they go from foster care to juvie to prison, and sometimes they never really did anything wrong in the first place.
Yeah, and so
So
it's essentially like foster care pipeline to fucking juvie pipeline or pipeline to fucking prison pipeline or whatever. So everybody's making money. It's almost like a fucking pyramid scheme or whatever. Like everybody's making money. You could see it like that, where everybody's
our
benefiting from
prison
this.
our prisons are private here. They're private corporations. So they have contracts with the state to keep their beds full,
Yep. Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so, like, I've been through Arcadia. Okay. They have a really big prison in Arcadia, and it's farm, it's beef farm, and it's a vegetable farm. And it's all the labor is done by the prisoners,
Yep.
and they don't get paid.
Yep.
So it's these private corporations that have contracts to keep their beds full, and now they have free labor, and they're making it's billions of dollars just for one prison. They're making all this money.
Yep. And then
So
these
yeah.
people,
So a lot of these,
and then when
and
these people
nobody's
get
going to
out,
fight for a foster kid,
yeah.
right? Like, so it's so sad. So
I think there needs to be like a phone number that people in these schools, both in these schools and in the foster care system, can call that to like a fucking like actual person that can help them on the outside. They'd be like, "Hey, I'm being abused. I need to be taken out of here." Like there needs to be a fucking number, but it has to be a fucking person that can be trusted and isn't compromised to be able to
well,
say like take complaints. But they need to be able to use this phone. They need to be able to have a phone call. Like you need to have a phone call. Like if you're being abused, you deserve a phone call.
straight, you weren't allowed near a phone.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
weren't allowed near. Yeah. So who are you going to call if I mean, even your toilet paper is rationed, and when or if you get to go to the bathroom, how are you going to call anybody? And
yeah,
what the hell is wrong with any parent that can't have a private conversation with their child unsupervised?
yeah,
So if you have a child in a program and you can't speak to your child alone privately, there's a problem with that.
yeah,
There's a big problem with that. So yeah, I think kids should be able to make these phone calls, but it's designed so that they can't.
yeah, yeah. I wonder, I'm sure it's happened, but I wonder how many people have randomly went to audit like foster care places and stuff like that. And like, just, I wonder if these schools could be audited as well. I've been thinking about it recently because like if they're taking government money, can't they be audited? Aren't they open for audits?
But they're not government funded, they're private. So a lot of these like wilderness therapy programs, that's private. The
Yeah,
parents are paying for their child to be there. And it's not a school.
yeah,
So, and they're out in the middle of nowhere where there is no cell service, not even cell service, right? So, how can you audit them if you don't even know where they are? Like,
yeah,
like these poor kids in Utah, they're somewhere in a desert. Where? How do you audit that?
yeah,
And like these religious schools, like these conversion therapy places that they send gay, those are private, and those kind of places are hiding under the guise of religious
yeah, yeah.
freedom,
So they have like
which
two,
can't be audited.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, I'm thinking about a way. I'm just working on something. I don't want to say too much about it, but yeah, I'm working on something. And hmm. So yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts on that. What was the worst thing that you experienced when you were at Straight?
There's so much. One of them was my 16th birthday. Um, so again, I was being non-compliant, right? Um, and I was on my 16th birthday. They let every kid scream in my face, poke at me, spit in my face. Like if I went to wipe the spit away, they'd slap me. Um, I literally endured an entire day of beatings, like not punching, kicking, shoved, hair pulling, poking me in the chest, spitting in my face, screaming.
Oh shit, are you still there?
Cake, right? And it said "Happy Birthday, Tammy."
Yeah.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You cut out for a second there. Your video cut out for a second, but I could still hear you. That was weird. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're getting a storm here, and I'm outside. So now in the middle of like this torture, they bring me out to look at the cake my parents bought for my birthday. Do you think I got any of it?
No.
And the foster home that I was in, the foster father took pity on me. And for my birthday, I was allowed a full 8 ounce glass of water. That's
Wow.
what I that's what I got for my 16th birthday. And when I went to get in the shower, my entire chest was like purple from being poked so much that my entire chest was just purple with bruises. And they're letting these guys that are 200-pound guys, big, huge guys, scream in my face, poke me, shove me. Um, so yeah, I mean that was my 16th birthday, and that was also one of those open meeting nights. So not only was it my 16th birthday, um, and I just had like been beaten pretty much all day, um, and didn't get my own birthday cake. But then my parents are standing there with a microphone in front of 500 people saying how disappointed they were, and and not even knowing that like I had been pretty much beat up all fucking day. Um, they didn't know. And then there was the time that Nancy Reagan came, right? So Nancy Reagan
I
came to
heard
Straight
about
a
that.
Lot. Yeah. So again, I was non-compliant. So they couldn't have like any disgruntled children. Like, they didn't want her to see that. So they took all of us uh, non-compliant kids into different intake rooms, right? And they sat on us the whole time. And so um, I could hear when they were introducing her when she came in, everybody was clapping. And I was actually in the intake room in St. Pete. It's like the big room where Nancy Reagan was. And there was like this little closet that they call the timeout room, where they would like take people and beat the shit out of them. And I think they had it in that big room so other kids could hear the kids being beaten up. Well, they didn't want me to make any noise like while it was quiet. So so not only do I have like a child on each limb, so 5 girls sitting on me, one on my chest, she actually covered my mouth and my nose. And I don't know if I had a near death experience, if it was disassociation, but I literally like left my body. Like I had an out of body experience. Um, and so I must have been very close to death, not being already having trouble breathing, and then somebody actually putting their hand over my mouth and my nose. So those are two things. And then there was the enema therapy that I don't know if we should really get into that here, but it is what it sounds like. It wasn't consensual. Multiple people holding you down. It was violent. And this was a form of therapy
Was
that no one
is that
knew.
like a form of booty juice or something?
Uh, did you ever see one of those big red water bottles?
Yeah.
And then there's like a hose to it.
Yeah.
That's what they used.
Okay. Okay.
So, um, you don't have any control over your bowels after that. So, and
Okay.
there's a
Okay. Okay. So it was an actual enema. Okay. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So yep. And they would bring it out and like other girls, I mean, I've talked to survivors from different programs, different time frames. That was a thing. That was a thing that was done. And they would bring this thing out and you could tell the girls that it had been done to because they would just like go into shock when they would see that thing. Um, yeah, so sexual assault was a form of punishment in Straight Incorporated. That is the truth.
Okay. Okay. Um, and if you could go back in time and not go through straight, knowing what you know now, would you do it and why?
Of course I would go there.
Okay. Okay.
Um, I think if I could go back in time, all right, let's say I would have never gone back the first time. I wish I had known that I wish when I got out that I had gone to a lawyer. Um, I mean, I really probably should have never even spoken to my parents ever again. When you tell them what's going on and they don't believe you and they send you back and then they see you with black eyes and fat lips and they keep you there anyway. I should have never spoken to my parents ever again.
Yeah.
Like, once I was 18, I should have just disappeared. So, um, I did, no, like I said, I knew that straight would abduct people that were not court ordered, that were over 18. Um, the only thing they couldn't have were pregnant girls, right? And I saw forced abortions in there as well. And there was no, these girls that had abortions forced, there was no recovery for them. They were thrown right back in the group, um, and expected to, flap their arms. Um, and so I like immediately got pregnant. I had 3 kids and no coping skills really. Um, so that was kind of unfair for my children. Um, but if I could go back in time, I wish I would have known to call somebody like of authority or at least after getting out, a lawyer. I mean, there's a lot of things knowing what I know now. Of course, I would have done things differently, but can't
Mhm.
can't change. I can't build a time machine. You know, there's no time machine. So sorry, it's getting dark. So that's why you can't see me.
No, no, it's all good. Um, okay. How were you with your parents afterwards? Sounds like that it was still really rocky. Did you ever get to tell them how the place, like what actually happened to you and how it affected you? Did you ever get to have that conversation?
I did tell them things that went on there, and they didn't believe me.
Okay.
So there was no point in talking about it,
Okay.
really. Um,
Okay.
I certainly have serious trust issues. Um, and in fact, the brainwashing of the parents is what's most concerning. Even recently, I'll give you an example. Okay, so I just came back to Hollywood after 25 years, and I'm having a conversation at IHOP with my mom and my uncle, and we're talking about our gardener, right? And so my mom's like, yeah, Tammy knows him, or I don't know how it came out that I actually knew the guy. He was a friend, right? And so my uncle's like, well, how do you know him? And my mother butts in and she's like, oh, from her druggy days. Straight used like they programmed us to use all these weird words like
Yeah.
druggy, instead of like drug addict or drug problem. Um, and the fact of it, the truth of it is, I didn't meet this guy until I was in my 20s. It had nothing to do with before I went into straight. So there were no druggy days with this guy. I
Yeah.
didn't know him then, you know. Another example is I wanted to stop at this place to see if it was still owned by the same people and perhaps see if I could get a job. And my mother had like this total meltdown that I was going to a bar, I'm fucking 58 years old,
Yeah.
right? And she's like flipping out saying, if you go to that bar, don't come back. It's not a bar, it's a restaurant. But that's the opinion that she has of me, is that I'm some derelict drug addict. Even after she knows all the shit that happened in straight, it's still somehow I deserve that, or that was what was necessary. And it was never necessary for any of us, ever. Like,
Yeah.
there's no excuse. There is no excuse to do that to any child. Like, you don't abandon your kid in some warehouse and not be concerned that you're taking orders from a teenager,
Yeah.
right? And that you can't have a private conversation with your child. These are all serious red flags. yet they chose to ignore them. And it baffles me. Like, were you really that stupid?
Yeah.
Or did you just not care? Um, I don't get it. I don't get it. So yeah, so to this day, I've had some kind of drug problem I'm unaware of.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Um, was there anything else you want people to know about your experience? I also, if you're open to it, I would like to do part two, just like maybe talk to
Where
you
you
more
can see
about,
me?
yeah, that too. But with the MK Ultra and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think it was an extension of it. Although I don't really talk about that because it does sound so crazy. But then again, you can't even talk about what happened there because that sounds so crazy too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, but mind control, that's what MK Ultra was about, and that's exactly what Straight Incorporated was
Yeah.
about because I really did believe that they knew what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I really believe that.
How to push you over the edge. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, is there any final thoughts right now?
Thank you for doing this and thank you for being a voice. So that's awesome. And we need to push for some kind of regulation when it comes to children. I don't care if it's a wilderness therapy program. I don't care if, well, first of all, these conversion therapy places are sick and shouldn't be allowed at all.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it's a religious
No.
place.
That
They,
might even
if
make it
as
worse.
long as there's
Might even,
as long as there's children involved, there has to be some kind of oversight.
and accountability. Yeah. 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 All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thanks. I appreciate it. And I will reach out about doing a part two. All right.
All right, you take care. Sorry about
Yeah.
the delay.
No, no, it's totally all good. And if you guys have watched the video so far, please make sure you like the video, share, comment, and keep moving the algorithm up. Thanks and have a good night. Bye, y'all.
You too. Thank you. Bye.